You can't just come here and expect us to leave. This is our land. Get off my property. You have no right to be here. This is a disgrace.
I'm leaving. I'm leaving now.
It all began on a blistering July morning in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Atlanta. The lawns were trimmed with military precision, the sidewalks freshly pressure-washed, and every mailbox stood the exact same height. It was the kind of neighborhood where appearances mattered more than anything else. At the center of all this control was the Homeowners Association, the HOA. They decided the color of your shutters, how tall your grass could grow, even what kind of car you could park in your own driveway. To them, rules weren't suggestions. They were law. For most people, the HOA was just part of the price of living there. But for Malcolm Carter, it was a constant battle. Malcolm was 55, strong and broad-shouldered, with skin that told the story of years spent working under the sun. He carried himself with quiet dignity, never raising his voice unless he had to. His property sat on the very edge of the neighborhood, and unlike the identical houses around him, his land looked different. He didn't have a manicured lawn or matching shrubs. Instead, his yard was alive with peach trees, tomato plants, wildflowers, and an old oak that shaded his tractor. His house was built with his own 2 hands on land passed down from his grandfather, Henry Carter. That land was his pride. His family's history was written into every inch of it. Henry Carter had bought it back in 1942, a time when black families were denied loans, denied fair wages, and denied opportunity. But Henry worked day and night, saved every penny, and purchased acres no one else wanted. What others saw as worthless, Henry saw as a foundation for the future. He used to tell Malcolm's father, and later Malcolm himself, "As long as you take care of the land will take care of you." Malcolm never forgot those words. But the HOA didn't care about history. All they cared about was control. It started small. A letter about his tractor being unsightly. Another about his shed not meeting community standards. Then came the fines. $500 for the tractor, $1,000 for the shed, $2,500 for non-conforming landscaping. They even fined him for the color of his shutters, which were the exact same color they'd always been. Malcolm shook his head and tossed the letters aside. "My land, my rules," he muttered. But the fines didn't stop. They doubled, tripled. By midsummer, the total was staggering, $250,000. One evening, Malcolm sat on his porch with a letter in his hand. His daughter, Jasmine, home from college, came out and sat beside him. "Daddy," she whispered, reading the number, That's $250,000. They can't be serious." "Oh, they're serious," Malcolm said, sipping his sweet tea. His voice was calm, but Jasmine noticed the flicker in his eyes. "What are you gonna do?" she asked. He leaned back in his chair, gazing across the land his grandfather had once tilled with his bare hands. "Baby girl, sometimes people think they can push you around because you stay quiet. But quiet don't mean weak. I've been patient long enough. Now it's time to remind them who they're dealing with." Jasmine tilted her head. "Remind them how?" Malcolm smiled, slow and steady. "You'll see." The night of the HOA meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Neighbors filled every chair. Some curious, some judgmental, others secretly rooting for Malcolm but too afraid to say it out loud. At the front sat the HOA board, with Richard, sharp suit, slick hair, and smug grin holding the gavel. He loved moments like this. He loved power. He tapped the gavel sharply. "This meeting will now come to order. First item of business, Mr. Carter's violations." Malcolm stood up, calm as ever, and walked to the front with Jasmine at his side. She carried a thick leather folder. Richard smirked. "Mr. Carter, you owe this association $250,000. If you cannot pay, we will pursue foreclosure. We will seize your property." A collective gasp filled the room. Some neighbors whispered. Others stared, waiting for the fireworks. But Malcolm didn't raise his voice. He laid his papers on the table and spoke evenly. "I've read your letters. I've seen your fines. And I've sat quietly while you threatened me. But tonight?" He leaned forward, his voice steady as stone. "Tonight we settle this." Richard chuckled under his breath. "You don't have the authority." Malcolm cut him off. "Actually, I do. Because while you've been busy bullying people, I've been busy looking at records, land records. The room grew tense. My grandfather didn't just buy a house in 1942. He bought acres of land. Land nobody else wanted back then. And when the county developed this subdivision, do you know what they did? He tapped the papers. They built it on Carter land. Every lot, every cul-de-sac, every mailbox sits on land owned by my family. This neighborhood exists because we allowed it. Gasps, murmurs. A woman in the back dropped her pen. Richard's face went pale. That's ridiculous. Malcolm slid the deed across the table. County seals, signatures, clear as day. Jasmine stepped forward and read aloud. Property owner, Malcolm Henry Carter, heir to Henry Carter, original purchaser of parcel der 117. The room erupted. People craned their necks trying to see. A man whispered, "He owns the land?" Another said, "Then what does that make the HOA?" Malcolm leaned in close to Richard. "It makes you tenants, and it makes me your landlord." A stunned silence fell. Richard stammered, That can't be enforced?" "Oh, it can," Malcolm said, his voice like thunder now. "And it will. So here's how this goes. You tear up every fine. You stop harassing me and anyone else you think you can bully. Or I end every lease agreement you've got. No leases, no homes. You'd all better get real comfortable with the idea of moving trucks." The board froze. The audience erupted into whispers. Some neighbors smiled for the first time in years. A man in the back began clapping, then Jasmine joined in. Within seconds, the whole room was on its feet, applauding. Richard sat slumped in his chair, his power crumbling in front of everyone. He had no answer. Malcolm gathered his papers, turned to the crowd and said calmly, "Don't ever let anyone tell you you don't belong on your own land." Then he walked out, Jasmine at his side. Outside, the night was heavy with summer heat. Jasmine grinned, practically glowing with pride. "Daddy," she said, "you didn't just win. You changed everything. They'll never look at you the same again." Malcolm looked out across the fields where the cicadas sang in the trees. "Baby girl," he said. They forgot whose ground they were standing on. "Tonight," I reminded them. The next morning, word spread like wildfire. Neighbors who once looked down on Malcolm now greeted him with respect. Some even came to his porch, shaking his hand, thanking him for standing up, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever felt powerless against the HOA. The letters stopped. The fines vanished. The HOA meetings grew quiet, almost nervous whenever Malcolm's name came up. But more than that, the neighborhood changed. People started planting gardens again, repainting their houses the colors they loved, parking their cars in their own driveways without fear of letters in the mail. Malcolm's victory gave them permission to breathe. And as for Malcolm, he didn't boast or brag. He simply kept tending his land, just as his grandfather once did. Quiet, patient, strong. Because he knew the truth. Real power doesn't come from control or fines or titles. Real power comes from knowing your worth and never letting anyone take it from you. The lesson is simple. Never underestimate someone who knows their roots. Never mistake patience for weakness. And never forget, land, history, and dignity run deeper than paper rules. If this story inspired you, let it remind you. Stand tall for what's right, protect what's yours, and never let bullies make you feel small on your own ground. If you believe in justice and fairness, share this story. Hit like, subscribe for more powerful stories, and let us know in the comments what lesson you took from Malcolm's fight. Because sometimes the quietest man in the room turns out to be the one holding all the power.